The battlefield in eastern Ukraine has erupted into one of the most intense and brutal phases of the war, centered on the strategic cities of Pokrovsk and Siversk in the Donbas Oblast. These two urban centers, once home to tens of thousands of people, have become the focal points of a massive Russian offensive, characterized by overwhelming firepower and a seeming disregard for human life. Russian forces are executing a pincer movement aimed at encircling Ukrainian troops defending the area and capturing critical transportation and logistical hubs. The city of Pokrovsk, a vital railway junction, serves as a primary artery for supplying the Ukrainian military in the entire southern Donbas region. Its falls would severely cripple Ukraine's ability to defend its remaining territories in Donbas and could trigger a cascading collapse of the front line. Further north, Siversk acts as a key defensive bastion, preventing Russian forces from pushing westward toward the major cities of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. The Russian military is employing a scorched earth strategy, relentlessly bombarding both cities with a terrifying mix of artillery, rocket systems, and most devastatingly powerful guided aerial bombs known as FABs. These massive bombs, launched from Russian aircraft flying beyond the range of most of Ukraine's depleted air defense, are systematically leveling entire city blocks, turning apartment buildings, hospitals, and schools into rubble. The objective appears to be to make the cities completely indefensible, forcing Ukrainian troops to retreat or face annihilation. On the ground, Russian commanders are using meat assault tactics, landing waves of infantry, often poorly trained and equipped, to probe and overwhelm Ukrainian position through sheer numbers. This combination of overwhelming aerial bombardment and relentless ground assault has created a humanitarian catastrophe of staggering proportions and is stretching Ukrainian defenses to their absolute limit. The escalating crisis in Pokrovsk and Siversk has become the single most urgent topic of discussion within President Donald Trump's national security team in Washington. The raw, unfiltered reports coming from the front line paint a picture of desperation and have lent a terrifying new weight to Kyrylo Bodanov's earlier warning about Ukraine's potential collapse. The situation is being viewed as a direct and violent manifestation of President Putin's unyielding position, a clear signal that Russia intends to achieve its territorial ambitions through brute force. In an emergency session of the national security conflict, President Trump was presented with detailed satellite imagery and intelligence reports showcasing the scale of the destructions. The president, who has long expressed a desire to avoid deeper American involvement, is now confronted with the grim reality that a Russian military victory in this key sector could have immediate and severe consequences for regional and global stability. The administration is scrambling to formulate a response that can effectively help Ukraine to hold the line without dragging the United States into a direct conflict with Russia. The focus has shifted from the theoretical discussions around back-channel diplomacy to the practical and urgent need to prevent a catastrophic military defeat for a key American partner. At the forefront of the American military response is Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth. The crisis has transformed the Pentagon into a 24/7 operational hub focused on expediting military aid to Ukraine. Secretary Hegseth has been in direct and constant communication with his Ukrainian counterpart, receiving real-time updates on the battlefield situations and the most critical needs of the Ukrainian force. The primary request from Kyiv is for more air defense systems and interceptor missiles to counter the relentless threat of Russian FABs. In response, Secretary Hegseth has authorized the immediate transfer of several Patriot missile batteries and a large consignment of NASA's air defense system from U.S. stockpiles. He has also ordered the Department of Defense to scour its global inventory for any available artillery pieces and, most importantly, the 155mm shells that are desperately needed to counter Russia's massive artillery advantage. The logistics of these efforts are monumental. The U.S. Transportation Command is orchestrating a massive airlift operation, flying equipment and munitions to hubs in Poland and Romania, from where they can be quickly transported across the border into Ukraine. Secretary Hegseth is also pushing American defense contractors to dramatically increase production rates, pricing them to meet the insatiable demand of the Ukrainian front. He has argued forcefully within the administration that the only language President Putin currently understands is force, and that the most effective American response is to provide Ukraine with the overwhelming military support it needs to make the Russian offensive so costly that it becomes unsustainable. The intelligence agencies are working overtime to provide a clear picture of Russian intentions and capabilities in this critical sector. Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, John Ratcliffe, is overseeing an intensified intelligence gathering operation. CIA assets on the ground and technical surveillance systems are focused on tracking Russian troop movement, identifying ammunition depot, and monitoring the command and control structures orchestrating the Pokrovsk and Siversk assault. This intelligence is being relayed in near real time to Ukrainian commanders to aid in their targeting and defensive planning. Director John Ratcliffe has reported to the president that the current Russian offensive represents a major strategic commitment by the Kremlin, involving some of its most capable remaining units. Meanwhile, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard is providing the broader strategic context. Her analysis suggests that the Russian objective is not just to capture territories, but to break the will of the Ukrainian army and people. By creating a crisis of such magnitude, Russia hopes to force a collapse in morale and compel Kyiv to sue for peace on Moscow's term. Director Gabbard has also warned of the high risk of a miscalculation on either side that could lead to a wider escalation. He has pointed out that while Russia is currently pressing its advance, its forces are also suffering immense casualties, and the long-term sustainability of such a high-intensified offensive is questionable. Our advice to the president is to navigate these crises with extreme caution, providing support to Ukraine while simultaneously keeping lines of communication open to prevent an uncontrolled spiral of conflict. The diplomatic front is being managed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is engaged in a whirlwind of activity aimed at bolstering international support for Ukraine. He is using the crisis in Pokrovsk and Siversk as a rallying cry to spur greater actions from European allies. In conversations with the foreign ministers of Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, Secretary Rubio is painting a stark picture of the consequence of a Ukrainian defeat in Donbas. He is arguing that the fall of these key cities will not just be a Ukrainian tragedy, but a European security disaster, bringing a triumphant and aggressive Russian army right to the eastern doorstep of NATO. He is urging European nations to match the American commitment by sending more of their own heavy weapons, particularly long-range artillery and armored vehicle. Secretary Rubio is also working to build a broader global coalition to condemn Russia's brutal tactics. He has instructed U.S. Ambassador at the United Nations to present evidence of the undiscriminated bombing of civilian area and to push for a General Assembly resolution on condemning Russia action. The goal is to further isolate Russia on the world stage and to increase the political pressure on Moscow to halt its offensive. Secretary Rubio is operating on the principle that military support and diplomatic pressure must go hand in hand to effectively counter Russia's aggression. The horrific humanitarian fallout from the fighting is the primary focus of Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The relentless bombardment of Pokrovsk and Siversk has created a desperate situation for the tens of thousands of civilians who remain trapped in or near the fighting. Hospitals are overwhelmed with casualties, and medical supplies are running critically low. Rescue workers are struggling to pull survivors from the rubble of collapsed buildings, often while under fire themselves. In response, Secretary Kennedy is coordinating with the World Health Organization and numerous non-governmental organizations to rush emergency medical aid to the region. This includes trauma kits, surgical equipment, blood supplies, and essential medicines. He is also advocating for the establishment of secure humanitarian corridors to allow for the safe evacuation of civilians, a proposal that has so far been rejected by the Russian military. Secretary Kennedy's department is also focused on the looming public health crisis, as the destruction of water and sanitation infrastructure has raised the risk of outbreak of cholera and other waterborne disease. He has released emergency funding to support mobile medical clinics and public health schemes that are working to prevent a secondary health crisis from emerging amidst the devastations of the war. The legal ramifications of Russia's conduct in the offensive are being closely monitored by Attorney General Pam Bondi. Her office is working with international human rights organizations and Ukrainian investigators to collect and preserve evidence of potential war crimes. Systematic and targeted destruction of civilian infrastructure, including hospitals and schools, and the use of indiscriminate weapons in densely populated areas could form the basis for future prosecution. Attorney General Bondi has publicly stated that the commanders who are ordering and executing these attacks will be held accountable. She is providing American legal expertise and forensic support to the teams on the ground who are documenting the atrocities. This includes training in evidence collections, witness interviews, and the use of satellite imagery and other technologies to verify claims of war crimes. He sees the crisis in Pokrovsk and Siversk not just a military battle, but as a crime scene, and is determined to ensure that the pursuit of justice is not a casualty of the conflict. The crisis is having a profound impact on nearly every aspect of Ukraine's national life, a reality reflected in the concerns of other members of the Trump administration. Secretary of Transportation Son Duffy is working with Ukrainian officials to find alternative routes for supplying their force, as the main railway lines through Pokrovsk are now under direct fire. His department is providing technical expertise on rapid bridge repair and the use of temporary logistical routes to keep supplies flowing to the front. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Eric Turner is looking at the devastations of these cities with a heavy heart, knowing that each destroyed building represents a family displaced and a community shattered. His department has begun modeling the potential costs of rebuilding Pokrovsk and Siversk, a task that will require billions of dollars and years of effort. The sheer scales of this destruction is a stark reminder of the long and difficult road to recovery that lies ahead for Ukraine. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins is concerned about the impact of the fighting on some Ukrainians' most fertile farmlands. The Donbas region is a major producer of sunflower oil and grain, and the conflict is not only destroying the current harvest but also contaminating the land with unexploded ordnance and chemical pollutant, which will affect agricultural productions for years to come. Secretary of Veteran Affairs Douglas Collins is in contact with Ukrainian veterans organizations, which are struggling to cope with the surge in casualties from the Eastern Front. He's working to facilitate the medical evacuations of some of the most severely wounded soldiers to specialized treatment centers in the United States and Europe. Finally, Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Lee Zedlin, is tracking the severe environmental damage caused by the intense fighting. His destruction of industrial facilities, the widespread fire, and the heavy use of explosive ordnance are releasing toxic material into the air, soil, and water, creating long-term environmental hazards for the region. The crisis in Pokrovsk and Siversk is a microcosm of the larger war, a brutal confluence of military violence, human suffering, and geopolitical maneuvering that has captured the full and urgent attention of the United States government. Many of my listeners, like 70%, have subscribed to my YouTube channel. So many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to world global conflict, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first ones on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you're a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build this show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.